Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Real Talk NYC Real Estate Podcast with John and Jonathan. Today, we are going to talk about garden apartments and what that means.
A garden apartment in New York City is a ground floor apartment that is attached to a garden.
Yes.
It's attached to outdoor space.
Yes.
Okay?
There's some caveats there. Like, as is always the case, agents sometimes take liberty with stretching the definitions, much like stretching a neighborhood, when they...
Like stretching the name loft-like.
Yes.
Okay, go
Oh, my goodness. So garden apartments, sometimes that term is used here in the city when people are talking about just a first floor apartment in general, or an apartment that may have... It doesn't necessarily have an outdoor space. Maybe it overlooks a garden space.
Yeah.
And that, it is one of the annoyance factors of our industry, where it's like you do get people that don't really dig into the nitty gritty or understand the little caveats around definitions. We're not going to talk about terrace versus balcony, which is a pet peeve of mine, but you got to just look through that and just realize if it says garden apartment, doesn't necessarily mean that it has a garden, but technically it should.
And one other thing to clarify, I think, on a garden apartment, is the garden part of the apartment? Even, we've had instances where there's entrance to the garden, but it's part of the building, and the building has access to it, where there's a second entrance to that outdoor space.
Yeah.
So that's another
common
thing.
Garden.
It could be a common garden. Yeah. We've had that actually happen, I think, in two different, technically in two different apartments that we've sold. So but really for the audience's sake, a garden apartment is an apartment that has,
outdoor
direct
space.
Access to its own private outdoor
ground
space.
floor.
Ground floor apartment,
Yeah. So pros of a garden apartment would be things like easily accessible.
Correct.
So generally speaking, it could be a maisonette, which we'll talk about in another podcast, but a maisonette where you have your own entrance or an entry off of the lobby itself. So you don't have to get in an elevator to get to it. So easily accessible, pet friendly. So if you have a dog or something, that's a really
in the middle of the winter when it's 20 degrees below zero, and you can just go ahead, a Rover.
Yes. Yeah. Just go ahead.
Come on back.
Sometimes they can be quieter if they're in the back of the building. Of course, they could be louder if they're in the front of the building as well. Although generally that would be the living space where noise isn't as distracting as a bedroom or something would be. And then the cons.
I want to say one more pro.
Obviously, the biggest pro in a garden apartment
is that the garden, the garden, which is so
space,
fantastic if you are an avid outdoor person living in the concrete jungle. To have that kind of little oasis can be really special.
Of course, gardens come in all shapes and sizes.
All shapes and sizes and all levels of condition. Where you say, that's my garden, and you say, wow, somebody doesn't have a green thumb.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, important to know what is the usage right of that space. So
does it have water? Does it have electricity?
Yeah.
Things like that.
So cons, what are
they can tend to be a little bit darker. Are you up against the building to the north or the south? They're not view apartments.
Right.
The biggest view is looking to the garden.
Although if you have a nice big garden, you plant it nicely, you've got a tree back there, one could say, pretty nice view.
It's a very nice view. And then additionally, as I would say, could be the case with also a penthouse, when the building does any kind of pointing work or construction, and they have the bridges that need to be constructed.
Yeah, scaffolding.
The scaffolding, that could become an area where it needs to be kind of a construction staging, and it could become a real nightmare for
essentially losing the ability to use it. No matter what, the building's going to have the right to use that space for things like capital improvements, which number one would be that local law 11. Now, a lot of garden apartments are on smaller buildings, and that local law only comes into play on buildings that are taller than 6 stories. So if it's one of these small converted co-ops or condos, small buildings that have been converted to a co-op or condo, and you have a garden apartment, in that, then you wouldn't have to deal with that. But it is one of the things that, we always talked with our buyers about, like, you want a penthouse, you want outdoor space. whether that's a penthouse or a garden level apartment versus a mid-floor, that's a factor you should be aware of. Last but not least, there can be rodents and pests that could come about. I would say in any substantial, like any building that's more than, 15, 20 units, they usually has an exterminator there every single week. Like they stay on top of it. So we rarely hear, I can't say I've ever really had, because we've sold a few of these garden apartments over our tenure together, many of these. I've never heard it as like a big issue.
That's correct. Neither have I. The only thing I would say is that if the apartment was located next to a restaurant, which that has happened, so you have to be careful of who's next door. But if you have, let's say, gardens, the garden abuts another garden on both sides, I think that's kind of a non-issue. And Excellent. I certainly don't think you're going to see raccoons.
No raccoons. No, I haven't seen a raccoon in a long time.
Deer is not an issue in New York City.
You can plant whatever you want. You don't have to worry about the deer coming in and eating
Plant those crocuses and tulips. They will be yours.
If you have any further questions, because again, like all of the topics we talk about, there's lots of caveats and little niches that you need to think about and other things. But if you have any other questions, reach out to us. In the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly,
remain in gratitude.
See you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for watching or listening to the Real Talk NYC Real Estate Podcast. If you want to find us online or sign up to get our monthly and quarterly market stats, come on over to our website, GasdaskaConlonTeam.com, or you can find us on all social media with the handle @Gasdaska Conlon Team. If this show was helpful, entertaining, or informative, consider telling friends and family or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss our next episode, and we'll see you next time.